Hello. With the Los Angeles Times and the Envelope, I'm Mark Olson.
And I'm Amy Kaufman.
And gentlemen, thank you all for being here today. Robert, if I can, I'm going to start with a question for you.
Okay.
Your character in the movie and the way that he's kind of taking stock of
Yeah.
where he's at, does that cause you to do the same thing?
Well, I'm always taking stock. I mean, that's one of the reasons I wanted to do the movie, because of getting older and Art Linson and so on. You know, our age, you start thinking about those things. These guys are not thinking about it now. Well, maybe they
I'll
are.
come to the end.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So that's so yeah. I've always you think, I mean, the character is different and makes me feel when I'm doing it, when I see real comics doing it, how difficult it is, and how special you have to be a comic. It's not an easy thing.
And Adam, your film Paterson is very much set in Paterson, New Jersey. I mean, it's a rare instance where the city really is a part of it. So for you, what was the importance of why Paterson? I mean, the movie sort of explains that, but what was kind of the significance of shooting the movie there?
I don't know. That's a Jim question. I think we were only there for 2 weeks. I think something about having this beautiful, falls in the middle of a very industrial, depressed area. I think that kind of the place itself, that there's all these contradictions in it. I think is probably what it initially interested Jim. But then we were only there for 2 weeks and mostly shot things in the Bronx.
What about, you learned to become a bus driver for that, right?
I did, yeah.
How scary is it, like, wielding this big vehicle?
It's like I've always marveled at people who learned how to drive in New York, but because it's so chaotic, I learned how to drive in Indiana, then, applied my skills in New York, I guess, but parallel parking a bus in New York, in Queens is difficult, but it's okay. It's like anything, do it enough and it's not so bad.
And Joel, for Loving, you learned bricklaying, which was the profession of your character in the movie?
Yeah, I mean, I learned a bit about bricklaying. I did a handful of hours with these guys at a trade school. Went along about 4 or 5 times, just to to be honest, it was as much about not wasting Jeff's time on set, knowing there was like 15 or so little scenes or mini sort of moments in the movie where I had to lay brick, and not wanting to waste time. But also, I mean, Jeff was constantly on about the posture of the character I was playing, because we had footage of him, and that he'd really been kind of shaped by his job, because of his sort of slumped shoulders and what have you. And so I went along to do it for a couple of reasons. But I'm not a master bricklayer. I do look at buildings and sort of can work out roughly what era they were built in, though, because of the different styles of bricklaying at different times. But I think there's something about certain things that you have to do on film that you just have to do, right? You can fake a lot of stuff, but it's worth exploring certain things for practical reasons or character reasons, but some things you got to explore, I think.
And Andrew, have you found it difficult at all in talking about Hacksaw Ridge? I mean, it's a extremely violent, very intense war film that ostensibly has a message of pacifism, nonviolence, and religious faith. Mm-hmm. It's a complex film.
Yeah.
And is it difficult to sort of be able to convey the message of the movie in promotional sound bites in a way that you feel does justice to what the movie is?
I haven't found it difficult, weirdly, and I know that some of the responses, I've been confused about some of the responses, because it is the fact that you have a pacifist in the middle of a war situation is incredibly complex unto itself. So that is the film. And if you didn't depict the horror of war in the way that Mel does in the film, then this man's actions, this man that lived and walked among us, his actions would not be so miraculous. They would be ordinary. Fact is, he walked into the most hellish conflict in Okinawa with no weapon, with medical supplies, morphine, and plenty of doubt in his heart and genuine terror, but enough faith to not touch a machine of death. That's insane. It is insane. But no, I think the medicine in the film for me, the medicine in the story is very, very clear. And it's really this man and how he changed everyone around him just by being himself, just by not compromising who he was. That's a very simple message to me. That's a very simple salmon swimming upstream against the tide of the culture, no matter how many people are telling you you're insane, no matter how many people are telling you that to be something else, to fall in line. No, I mean, you know, and I think the ripples that his story and his actions made amongst the men that he served with, and then future medics who then, there was this whole new job description that he created. He created the conscientious cooperator. He was labeled as a CO, as a conscientious objector, but he invented a whole new title. And then there's been countless men and women who have then followed in his footsteps. And it took 50, 60 years to get this film made because he didn't want it have anything to do with Hollywood, or he didn't go to the movies. He was a guy that had no interest. He didn't want his actions glorified. Until 50 years later, when I think it was his church that said, you know, look at what you've done. Look at your story is much bigger than you now. And if think about how many more people could be affected by who you were and what you did. Okay, yeah, and a truly humble hero, someone, a new example of what it is to be a hero. You know, the kind of guy that wouldn't get elected to president in the current culture, someone who doesn't blow his own trumpet in any way, shape, or form.
Andrew, when you were deciding to sign on to the film, obviously a lot of people in Hollywood had strong feelings about Mel. Yeah. So how much did you have to weigh those, or do you just tune them out?
Oh no, I mean, it's all, you just check in with yourself. Like, I'm Jewish. My dad's Jewish, and I love Mel as a filmmaker, and I didn't know him as a man. And I obviously heard all the noise about that period of time a long time ago. And I sat with him for an hour, and I was like, okay, I'm good. Just because I, saw him. I just saw who he was, and he saw who I was, and we had kind of a deep conversation about potentially tricky things. But I was like, oh no, this is great. You're just a wonderful man. He's a wonderful man. He's just a loving, loyal. Anyone who really knows him. Like talk to Jodie Foster about Mel, like he's, no, it was, I just checked in with myself ultimately. It was easy. And he tells a great story. He tells a hell of a story. And like he viscerally shakes an audience like no other filmmaker that grabs your spine and shakes all your organs around and makes you feel like you're there. So yeah, I'm glad that he's making films again.
You were just saying, Andrew, that you're filming a movie in Silver Lake right now.
Yeah.
So when you were in Thailand for Gold, how much do you guys explore the area when you're in a place? Do you really try to get to know it, or are you just focusing on the project?
I mean, one of the things that, you go to these places that they say, oh, didn't you love the city, or didn't you see it? I don't know about you guys, but that seventh day, I'm sleeping. I'm not seeing much of the place. I'm not doing much after work on a so-called school night. But Thailand, in our film Gold, we were on the location. So we were on the river that flooded and took the 5 sets away. And we were shooting thirds of a scene because it would be sunny for the start of the scene. Then it would start to rain. You would have to move on and go shoot another scene. Then the sun would come back and you'd run back to that scene that you hadn't finished and shoot it. So, we were there with the elephants in the river and everything. So we saw a lot of the jungle in Thailand, and we were in, Bangkok for a while. So, we were shooting on location, so it was like being there, but not much free time. It was work time.
Andrew brought up Scorsese earlier, and I know, Adam, you guys worked together on Silence, and obviously other guys in this room have worked with Scorsese. He's so revered. Can you weigh in on what his special sauce is? Like, what sets him apart?
I want to hear what Mr. De Niro has to say about it.
Marty, every actor who works, not just actors, the crew work with him. He's very receptive to ideas, and he's a person that'll take a chance and do something, whereas another director might have and so the more he does that, the more he lets he lets you in. You have confidence and trust in him and he in you. And if something is not working, he'll either shoot it, but he'll cut it out, or or he'll use it, and it will be maybe a more interesting choice. But he said, okay, do it. That's happened with me a lot with him over the years.
Adam, is that what your experience was
And
like?
I think with other actors too, I'm sure. It's not just me.
Yeah, that he seems like Silence he's been wanting to make for 28 years, and so you would expect that this would be something that, and I would have been comfortable with showing up on set and it being a dictatorship and being like, well, I've been thinking about this for 28 years, so I know what it is, but he's very good at knowing his subject very well, knowing everything about it, knowing the story and being very specific, but at the same time getting on set knowing that he's been thinking about it for 28 years and not knowing what's going to happen, and being open to being wrong after been kind of just sitting over it for that amount of time. And also, I started working my way through his movies again when we were doing Silence and watched Italian American. And for me, that movie, I'm like, oh, I get it. Even though that they're all, his movies seemingly on the surface are very different, like Hugo and The Departed, that they're all very personal, and they all kind of seem to come from the same place. And because they're very personal, which you can kind of see in Italian American, I think that's what makes them all good and unique and specific. The end.
Matthew, you had a relatively small role in Wolf of Wall Street, but I mean, it was very memorable. And what was that experience like for you working with Martin Scorsese?
For me, my relationship with he loves funny. He loves funny and music. I mean, on the day when 2 days we were shooting, I don't know how many words in the English language we even used back and forth to each other. Everything was he was conducting music. It was like a boom, 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 and you were rolling. So we were kind of playing music together, in my experience. And he's got enthusiasm, an infectious laugh that you're just, you're up with. And he was like, I walked away going, you know what? Marty loves funny, man. He loves funny. And it was a joy to work with him. I felt very much like a kid working with him, and him directing, the enthusiasm, the joy he has. You're seeing this big, masterful kid just all over it. But it was music. We didn't even talk English.
Music is a good way of putting it, actually, but that's all I had to say. But there is something very musical in his movies that you feel, and on set it does feel very musical. That's a great way of putting it.
Like a conductor.
He's very sensitive to sound and the speed of scenes, and is very conscious of the emotion is getting ahead of what the actual story is, but it's very rhythmic, I guess.
Yeah.
And Casey, there's a moment in Manchester by the Sea. I don't think I'm spoiling the movie by saying that it's sort of the emotional climax of the film. You have a moment with Michelle Williams, and it's one of the most incredible scenes I've seen in a very long time, in that there are not really full lines of dialogue. You're kind of stepping over each other a lot, and I'm just curious how that looks on the page, and sort of how you create these sort of emotional moments out of what feel like not really a whole conversation.
On the page, it was written as two people talking simultaneously. There's two small monologues sort of side by side. And Kenneth Lonergan has a great rhythm in his language, and there's a sort of a way of doing it. Once you find the rhythm, things tend to work better. And sometimes if you can't find it, he's very good at guiding you towards it. But he's also very, very specific about how he wants the dialogue to overlap at times. So there was a technical kind of component to it. It was just learning it sort of simultaneously, so that we're both half saying these sentences, saying half sentences at the same time. Sort of you're saying something as she's saying something, and then you're responding to what she almost said, and she's responding to what you almost said. And then there's the part of just trying to actually be there and be with the appropriate feeling. And they're not always two things that go well together. So we kind of had to learn it, just the technical, and then show up and do it. And but I guess, I don't know if your question sounds like it's partly like why did he write it that way, and why is that happening? And I think it's because he wanted the movie is largely about these two people, but you don't see them together that much, and then they happen to run into each other, and neither really knows quite what to say, but you understand both of them and what they might like to say to one another, but they're having a hard time. And Kenny doesn't write things where people sort of have these grandiloquent speeches and these huge cathartic moments where someone very eloquently says the thing that you know has been on their mind, and he sort of tends to write dialogue the way that people speak, the way that you might hear like these kinds of, even these sort of interviews where people are sort of trying to find their way through their answers and half saying things sometimes, and yet underneath it all, it's sort of the like magic of his writing is an enormous amount of emotion, and you understand the context of it all and what it's all really about, despite the fact that people are just arguing about if they're going to get pizza or Chinese food or do this or do that, and it seems like very surface conversation, but it's not. So that scene is the sort of culmination of a lot of building the emotional states of these two people building up to a point, and nothing really has to be said except to see them both try to communicate and fail.
Can I piggyback on that a second? But I'm guessing you wouldn't have walked away until you felt it was time to walk away from that scene, right? I mean, so,
yeah.
And if you wouldn't have stayed as long, it wouldn't have been as painful a revealing of a scene. If you'd have stayed longer, it could have borderline gotten repetitive, but you walked to a point where you were like, I'm out. And that timing, I mean, I don't know, I guess, was it scripted that many back and forths and overlaps? Or did you stay in there and you guys went at it, you and Michelle went at it until you were like, I'm done? And you walk away?
It was scripted to be at that point, more or less. I mean, there wasn't a lot of, we stuck to the script pretty much, very much. So that was sort of the point at which we're supposed to go away. And so if you know that you have to say, that's it, I can't take this anymore, I'm going to walk away, you have to start early on and get to that point so that you're leaving at the right moment. But making a movie like that, where you have 50 cents each day to shoot, and it's hard because that scene, for example, we have 2 hours to shoot it or so. So it's a lot of preparation, and then going into it, you hope that it's buttoned up pretty much, and if you got it, you got it. And but it was more or less the way it was written.
And Joel, in Loving, the tone of the film is so specific, and I know Jeff Nichols has talked about there was a more commercial version of the story of the Lovings that he purposefully did not write. And is it difficult for you as a performer to sort of sync up to his version, to like understand the way he wants to tell the story?
Not at all. I love that Jeff took that true story and decided to tell it truthfully, which is, it's a different thing than the typical telling of a true story with a lot of Hollywood spice added. And that Hollywood spice, I guess, would have been to really play up the courtroom drama, which still would have been a true story told truthfully to a degree as well. But we talked on set about the possibility for that film to become the reinvention of the high five, that when the Supreme Court case was handed down, if you placed Richard and Mildred in the courtroom listening to the case and have the celebration there, it's definitely the way that Hollywood might lean. Whereas to depict them at home doing the chores, that Richard was fixing his car when that happened, it feels very deflated in theory, and yet the culmination of all those true pieces building up on top of each other, the compression of that and tension of that injustice that the couple suffered for 9 years, that enduring process building up weight on top of them, and that final release, told truthfully, to me, becomes more of a celebration and more of a catharsis in a way, whereas it feels very quiet as a film, and yet it's very loud, I think. And we talked a lot about these things, but it never felt hard to get on board with that vision, because his observation of the silences between a couple in a relationship, his observation about domesticity, his observations and depiction of characters being silent in the face of like adversity and learning to shut their mouth felt very real. The silences in that movie said a lot more than a lot of dialogue that he could have written would have, and it felt like a safe place to be. As I was talking about the tennis ball on a stick before, this was like the opposite, for sure.
Adam, I know that you just finished the last season of Girls, which is how a lot of viewers got to know you. And obviously you've gone on to do a lot of different films, but was it challenging at first to sort of get people to see beyond the persona of your character on the show?
I don't know. I didn't have control over it of how people perceived it. I guess I didn't really think. We just, we shot the first season of it, and didn't come out for like a year and a half or 2 years. So we kind of forgot about it. Not forgot about it, but didn't really think at the time how will it be perceived, or will people like the character or not like the character. It's not really my job, I guess. I didn't give it much thought, I guess. But it's good that people liked the show. That's good. Yeah.
Is it, I mean, I'm sure it's sad to leave it behind, but is it partially freeing as well, just knowing you have your schedule cleared and don't have that sort of obligation every few months?
Yeah. I mean, it's good. I've never worked on something where you for 6 years, and I think it's good now that it's done. But it was also a good job, The people that was with, I mean, all the cliches that I think that people say about working on a television show that's familial and it's all true. But I guess we shoot it or did shoot it every summer. So I don't think it really hit me that it's not happening until I'm not doing anything in the summer.
Right. Yeah. Matthew, I wanted to ask you about your Lincoln ads, which have gotten a lot of attention. I know SNL even did a little parody of them. First of all, what did you see that? What did you think of it?
I didn't see them. I heard about them a lot, though.
Okay. And so those were shot by Nicholas Winding Refn, right?
The first series was, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so do you think that even advertisements can sort of be cinematic in a way?
Yeah, they can. I mean, they're different 30 seconds to get a message across. There's got to be images. Your images have to count. It's tough to put a message into 30 seconds. It's almost as much how do they feel, how do they smell, what's the tone of them. And we were going for, hey, let's be a knife cutting through all the loud stuff, cutting through the butter. And, I didn't look at it as, and I have before, I've thought about it before years ago, boy, if we're going to do an ad like that, can we get away with it? And I said, no, let's not try and get away with it. Let's go do something that I enjoy, something that I think is a nice, cool piece that I'm proud of. And we've made like 4 series of them now, and I'm happy with them, and Lincoln's happy with them, and we'll keep shooting some more.
And now, even when you were recently on True Detective, do you feel that there's been some sort of a shift that a lot of people are talking about between working in television and film? Like, did making True Detective just sort of feel like the same as being on a movie?
When that question came up to me, and I maybe asked it myself, oh, do you want to go do TV? And I remember that's about as long as I thought about it right there. I gave myself like 3.5 seconds. And I was like, look at this story and look at the character. I don't give a damn what screen it's on. Chase the good story, chase the character that's turning you on. And so the material was there. Now the difference was going to do 8 episodes, you've got a 450-page script. And your first act is 120 pages. And I remember for the first month playing that version of Rust and Coal where he's sort of boiling underneath. And I remember getting a little impatient and anxious at about week 5 going, I think I'm maybe really, really boring right now. And I had mapped it out and I said, wait a minute. He becomes Crash coming up. He gets wild, and that dynamic will shine a light on the more subdued, so just trust it. And in hindsight, I'm glad I did. But I did have an anxious moment because it was the longest first act that I've ever gotten to do, which is actors what we love. First acts are my favorite stuff, and it's the first thing they cut in our movies too, So it was wonderful to be able to create an original.
Because, Robert, it was just announced you're going to be appearing in a series for Amazon made by David O. Russell.
Yeah.
Are you excited about the prospect of examining a character along sort of a longer arc like that?
Yeah, I am. And the whole story, it's a saga. So I'm very excited by it, and David's working hard, and we're working together, and he's trying to work with the other actors, and just get it together.
And does it feel different somehow, like saying that it's television? Does that seem different?
Yeah, I mean, it's different, but television, they do better stuff than in movies at times. So it's a different thing, and it's a smaller screen, but some people have big screens. Some people have computer, it's whatever. The main thing is that it works and that people respond to it.
Robert, the other night at an award show, you were saying, you're in this film now, the comedian, and a lot of people generally maybe don't associate you with comedy, even though you've been in so many. Why do you think that is? Why don't they remember those?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I just, they wanted to change the name to some other kind of name that had no, and I said, no, we have to keep the comedian. He doesn't have to be a good comedian. It's not about that. The title is, we're lucky we have it. Just let's stick with it. And but there was thought of doing that. I don't understand it to this day. And they're very, very good distributors, really great guys. But anyway, we didn't do that. They said something about connected to the King of Comedy. It has nothing to do with the King of Comedy. People will perceive it to be this or that. I just don't. People are going to see the movie, like it or not like it or whatever. So it's not going to make a difference. But the title is really a good one.
With the comedian, a lot of people are going to be making that association with the King of Comedy. And is that something that ever enters your mind, even when you're deciding whether or not to make a film?
No.
Like your iconography, what people are going to bring to it?
It's a totally different story, movie, everything. So, and it's so long ago. I wouldn't.
The King of Comedy is some of the most excellent, uncomfortable scenes I think I can remember in any movie. Like, I'm a real fan of moments where things get really uncomfortable, and there's some that movie is one of my favorite kind of uncomfortable movies. It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
And I think that's where we're going to have to wrap it up. Gentlemen, I thank all of you for being here. And from the Los Angeles Times, I'm Mark Olson.
I'm Amy Kaufman. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.